Welcome to another mini training module presented by Marketing Strategy Management. Today's topic is a value chain approach for marketing. Now this is intended as an introduction to the value chain, so our objectives are fairly modest. We're going to talk about what is a value chain approach, and secondly, why you might want to use it. Let's start with why you might want to use it. In an earlier module, we talked about creating value for the customers, and we defined value as the perceived benefits relative to the price or cost. We then took that idea and we dissected it a little bit further. We said the perceived benefits are based on customer motives. They might be social in nature, functional, physiological, psychological, or some combination of these. The costs were based on whether the customer was willing and able to buy it. In this case, willing and able go hand in hand. And then there may also be the consideration of whether the customer is authorized to buy it. Now in that module, we had the example of the customer who wanted to buy a luxury car because he wanted the functional benefit of transportation and the psychological benefits that come with having a luxury car. The problem, however, was that he was unable to afford the luxury car. Consequently, he had to settle for an economy car. That way he got the functional benefit, but the cost also came down and he was now able to buy it, and that's how he got value fulfillment. Then we had another scenario where the customer was willing and able to buy the luxury car and enjoyed the psychological benefits as well. Now I want to set this aside just for a moment so that I can introduce you to a generic value chain. As you can see, in this value chain, it's comprised of several different components. And in a moment, I'm going to walk you through each of these components. But before I do, I want to explain why a value chain approach. And the reason is we want to manage the entire customer experience by managing it across the entire value chain. So for example, it's conceivable the customer could have a good product and service experience, but if there's ongoing distribution channel problems, then it diminishes the customer experience as a whole and value fulfillment is lessened. So we want to manage all of that. Let's start with the lower left-hand side and the market characteristics. This is about identifying customer needs and motives so that we can then target the product benefits to serve those needs and motives. What we're really doing here is something called outside-in thinking. We're going to take those needs and motives and we're going to go across each component of the value chain and figure out what needs to be done at that component to serve those needs and motives. For example, earlier we had the luxury car customer and we had the economy car customer. When it comes to the components of the value chain, we're probably going to do something different with each component depending on which of those two customers we're attempting to serve. The next component is the distribution channels component. This is the delivery path from the provider to the customer. Each dissimilar pathway represents a different distribution channel. So for example, if we look at the video rental industry, we can see multiple distribution channels. Some customers get their DVDs from a kiosk at the supermarket. Some go to the video rental store. Some get them through mail or download it from the internet. Some get it as a satellite feed or over cable. Each of these is a different distribution channel. In a case of our business, we want to make sure all the distribution channels we're using are working smoothly. The next component is the communications component. This is about conveying information, managing expectations, and especially now that we have social media marketing, creating dialogue. It's important to recognize there's an internal component and an external component. The internal component is about managing communications within the business, and the external component is about managing the communications outside the business, things like promotions, advertising, public relations, and so forth. The next component we want to look at is the transactions and operations component. These are the activities that support the business aspects of the marketing function. In the case of the transactions, we're talking about everything that influences the transaction itself. For example, does the customer have to go to the store to buy something, or can he do it through e-commerce? Is there a payment plan? Or can I do it on credit, or do I have to pay cash up front? Virtually everything that affects that transaction is considered in this component. Operations is about all those support activities and including the workflows across the value chain. When it comes to operations in particular, We're going to measure their effectiveness by cost, productivity, and efficiency metrics. The last component of the value chain is the product and service attributes. This is where we take customer motives and needs and incorporate them into our products and services. Now I want to go to the box that's below the value chain called external forces. These are the contextual conditions that impact our ability to shape and mold the value chain. The likelihood is most of these will be beyond your control. For example, there might be political factors like government regulations that we need to comply with. There could be economic factors, social lifestyle factors, technological factors, or cultural factors. All of these are going to have some impact on our ability to shape and mold the value chain, and we want to take those into consideration. The one I want to emphasize a little bit more than the others is the competition, because in addition to serving our customer motives and needs, we may also have to seek a competitive advantage. If we have competition who can serve customer motives and needs also, then we have to figure out how we're going to induce customers to come to us instead of go to them. So now we're back to our value chain, and we understand that it all has to be melded together to create one value fulfillment experience for the customer. At this point, I'd like to shift gears and go back to explaining why a value chain approach for you and how it might help you. The first of these identifies all the critical links and alignments associated with the marketing function, including the external forces that bear upon it. The very idea of a value chain implies there are critical links across the chain, and it's operations' job to make sure those are aligned so that everything works smoothly. The second is that it conditions people to think in the broader context of how all the pieces and parts of a marketing strategy fit together. So let's say, for example, I'm working in the distribution channel component, but I'm thinking in the broader context of the value chain as a whole. So I'm also concerned about making sure we're interfacing well with the product component, we're interfacing with the communications component, we're interfacing with all the other components that are part of that value chain. And so we're getting away from that siloed thinking where all I'm worried about is what I'm doing. I'm worried about what's going on across the value chain as a whole. Thirdly, it encourages a systematic strategy analysis process. So we can look at the customer experience from the value chain perspective, and we can look at what's working, what's not working, what can be fixed, and maybe what we're unable to do. What we're unable to do can be a tricky one, because if our competition is able to do something we can't, that may give them a competitive advantage. So that concludes our value chain approach module. And for more information on this and related subjects, visit marketingstrategymanagement.com. That's marketing-strategy-management.com. You'll discover loads of marketing information, and you'll even find there's a video for creating value that is also a mini module just like this. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.